Maria was putting the finishing touches on her skimpy makeup, carefully outlined eyes and red lipstick. Her smooth complexion and bright eyes, befitting a longtime athlete, freed her from the need for makeup that most of her friends wore. She took her bag and coat and left the apartment, locking them with two locks. By this time, the gray afternoon clouds were beginning to darken. When she left the apartment building in which she lived on the sixth floor of the Nuevo Leon building in Plaza Tlatelolco in Mexico City on September 18, 1985, she had no idea that she had just saved her life. She, too, had no idea about the painful change that would take place in her destiny, destroying her dreams of a calm and safe life next to Gerardo, her beloved husband. After walking 2 blocks, she got on the metro at Tlatelolco station in the direction of Indios Verdes, not far from the last stop. The 15-minute ride and relative silence in the carriage allowed her to remember, think, and dream. Since childhood, she has excelled in all sports. Originally from Veracruz, when she was 13 years old, and in high school, she was selected to compete in the interschool 100 and 200-meter sprint competitions. In her third year, her coach encouraged her to try the 400m, where she excelled even more, despite her reluctance to run the distance, which was undoubtedly more strenuous. She won a sports scholarship, which allowed her to continue her studies in Mexico City, living as an intern at one of the institutions of the National Sports Institute. Already in high school, her athletic performance improved, which led her to participate in national competitions, where she won a bronze medal. Her breasts were small but firm. Her pronounced buttocks and strong legs attracted any man who saw her on the rails. Her face, although not particularly beautiful, was pleasant. Her height of 5 feet 7 inches made her a tall woman. She has light brown skin, slightly slanted brown eyes, and short wavy black hair. Her great charm was how healthy and energetic she looked. She wasn't outgoing, but she had an easy smile and a friendly demeanor. Since she almost always wore jeans, her inferior qualities usually went unnoticed. Her slightly high-arched legs were perfect, at least in her husband's eyes. At the age of 18, she entered the higher school of physical education to become a professional sports coach. That same year, she met Gerardo Ursua at the sports center where she was training. Gerardo, 24, is a recreational runner who just graduated with an industrial engineering degree. Previously, Myril had only one boyfriend, and she never went further than a romantic relationship. Her parents, originally from Veracruz, instilled in her a strict religious education. But the atmosphere at ESIF, openly liberal, little by little changed her views on many aspects of her life. However, those who knew her considered Maria a conservative and reserved woman. Gerardo liked Maria's reserved and cautious style. While they were dating, he made great effort to limit himself to the normal, effective expressions used at the time. Not very long kisses and minimal touching of her breasts and hips. Nothing else. 2 years later, they got married in a very simple ceremony. Obviously, Maria married a virgin. The problem started a few months after they got married. Gerardo's sexual skills awakened Maria's sleepy sexuality, bringing it to a level that at first seemed normal given her inexperience. At 20, she was in her prime in every way. After 4 months, Gerardo realized that he could not withstand the rhythm of sexual activity required by Maria. Despite her inexperience, Maria understood that the problem was not Gerardo, but her. After discussing it openly, they agreed to buy several sex toys to satisfy her needs. Although she had a hard time adjusting, she somehow got used to a certain sex toy until Gerardo watched her. Gerardo understood this, and her life continued normally, but only up to a certain point. At night, after the inevitable sex, Gerardo went to sleep in another room, and Maria acted as her mood required. She went to the park near the San Cristobal Hotel, where she made an appointment with Mario. The fall of a few drops of water made her cover herself with her cloak, and she sat down on the bench. This was her 6th time making this trip. 10 minutes later, she caught a glimpse of Mario's figure approaching the park. Tall, dark, athletic, and handsome, Mario Ayala must be about 35 years old. He knew Maria from her athletic career and was her coach for a time when she was a teenager. They stopped seeing each other for a while until they met again at SF, where Mario had just received an assistant professor position. Maria always liked the attentive but respectful attitude that Mario provided to his students, caring first of all about his health, paying attention to all the details. In sports, coaches and instructors often applied the rule, no pain, no gain. The result ended with a lot of injured and disappointed guys losing hope. Mario was different. He always looks for quality of teaching rather than quantity. His parents always preferred him to other coaches because, on the other hand, he was always extremely respectful. He married at a young age and divorced 3 years later, leaving behind 2 children. Maria was very happy to see him again at SF, although she understood that she no longer saw him the same way as before. She was not yet married and was in love with Gerardo, but it was clear that she liked Mario. 2 years later, when her sexuality was at its height and Gerardo was away, Mario's proximity caused alarm in her head, but above all in the lower part of her stomach. At the park, they greeted each other with a light hug and then headed to the San Cristobal Hotel, located about 100 meters from the park. The hotel was an old 3-story building with 23 rooms. Its flat, dark yellow facade was a little dull, but looked well maintained. It was a combination of a family hotel and a temporary hotel, possibly with a 3-star rating. For the couple, the most important thing was their location and tactful handling of them, so meeting someone they knew was extremely unlikely. The administrator gave them room 314 and handed the key to Mario. The room located on the 3rd floor at the northern end of the corridor seemed to be closest to the hiding place. Mario and Maria quickly went upstairs and entered the room when the hotel clock showed 2018. The room was small but clean. The main space was occupied by a round table in the center, a double bed, a sofa, and an armchair. In the background is a small window with an antique shutter. There was a bathroom with a shower, toilet and countertop sink. Mario looked a little tired and threw himself onto the bed with his clothes on. Maria sat on the sofa, watching him carefully. Again, the image of Gerardo appeared in her mind, as if shouting at her to leave, to come home. But Mario's voice brought her out of her trance, exciting her. When Maria woke up, it was already more than 7. She knew she had to hurry to make it to SF before 8. She stood up and saw that Mario was still fast asleep. She didn't bother to wake him up and hurried into the shower, turning on the water without waiting for it to become warm. A few minutes later, she got out of the shower, took a towel, and began to dry her hair. Then she ran the towel over her back, and at that moment she felt the first shock into her body, which violently threw her against the sink, hitting her hip, but not dropping her. Then came a second push in the opposite direction, throwing her body against the wall. The third push threw her over the toilet, hitting her head, and from there to the floor. At that moment, she realized that the hotel was shaking from a strong earthquake. It was exactly 7:19 am on September 19, 1985. It experienced the strongest earthquake recorded in Mexican history. 2 minutes later, still on the ground, a cloud of dust, dirt, and bricks buried her in what looked like an untimely grave. After completing his engineering studies in Mexico City, Gerardo Ursua considered moving to Ciudad Juarez for more job opportunities. Originally from Mexico City, he lived with his mother Refugio and older brother Jorge. Tall 5'10" with a lean but wiry build, he has been involved in sports all his life. He sported a mustache that gave him some resemblance to swimmer Mark Spitz. His father died 9 years ago, leaving his mother a modest but sufficient pension to raise her children. His younger brother Ramon immigrated to Los Angeles shortly after his father's death. They knew little about him. Unlike his brothers, Gerardo was a reserved and conservative man. He found it difficult to make the first move with women, but fortunately for him, in his previous love experiences, almost always those he wanted helped him in some way. Over time, he learned to overcome his shyness. His conservative mentality, associated with his religious upbringing, accompanied him throughout his life. Gerardo was considering moving to the north of the country, where there were more job opportunities for engineers. He had Ciudad Juarez or Nogales in mind, but an unexpected offer at a soap factory on the outskirts of the city with a reasonable salary forced him to change his plans to emigrate, and he decided to wait a little to gain experience and improve his resume. Soon he met Myria, with whom he fell in love instantly and unexpectedly. 2 years later, they married and began living in an apartment in the northern part of the Nuevo Leon building in the Tlatelolco housing complex. Knowing the city well, Gerardo knew that buildings in this area of Tlatelolco had been experiencing sustainability problems since they were built, so the rents for these apartments were low compared to similar ones. However, after some modifications, the authorities gave the green light to these buildings, assuring that they do not pose any threat to the safety of their residents. Since Gerardo was still planning to emigrate to Ciudad Juarez, he found it convenient to rent an apartment in Tlatelolco. On the other hand, his modest income and the economic crisis in the country at that time simply did not allow him to hope for more, and Myria accepted the situation. 2 years after their wedding, Ricardo, a former classmate working in Ciudad Juarez, called him to inform him of an opening at the factory where he worked. It was a company that made electronic circuit boards for monitors and televisions, and there was a position available in the quality control department. After discussing this with Myria, he went to Juarez to learn about his responsibilities, benefits, and work environment. Ricardo convinced him that this was a good offer to start with, and that once he was there, other job opportunities would certainly arise. Convinced, Gerardo returned to Mexico City to discuss this with Myria. They agreed that Gerardo would leave for a couple of months while Myria finished her school year at SF and Gerardo found housing. Whenever possible, Gerardo will come to Mexico City to be with her. Gerardo quit his job and went to Juarez, where he temporarily lived in Ricardo's apartment, which had a spare room. The apartment was small, but better than the ones he knew in Mexico City. 2 weeks were enough for Gerardo to be convinced of the correctness of his decision. The work was a little stressful, but he learned quickly and adapted to the environment. Gerardo's superiors and subordinates recognized his technical abilities and easygoing nature. On Thursday, September 19th, Gerardo got up a little early to prepare a snack for work. After showering and dressing, he turned on the TV and headed to the kitchen. A few seconds later, he heard something about an earthquake on the news. He returned to the living room, turned up the volume on the TV, and moved closer to the screen to understand what he was seeing. The scenes of destruction and the reporter's comments made a knot in his stomach. Mexico City has just experienced a major earthquake and is plunged into destruction and chaos. The authorities had not yet made any statements, so all the information was confusing and contradictory. Reporters multiplied in search of information, but almost all communication lines were overloaded, as were the water and electricity supplies. Ricardo's voice behind him startled him. "Don't worry, people in Mexico are used to it." "No, Ricardo, this seems like something very different." "Would you like to call to see how things are going?" "Sure, but all the lines seem to be down." Gerardo took the phone in the apartment and dialed Myria's house number. 15 unanswered beeps confirmed that the lines were down. He dialed his mother's house number with the same result. He consulted the address book and dialed the numbers of 2 of his friends in Mexico without success. He had no choice but to continue watching TV and wait. Ricardo asked him not to go to work and explain his absence. "I will be grateful. Obviously, I won't go to work today. I have a bad feeling," Gerardo said. Ricardo left very concerned because radio and television coverage of the earthquake had been unusually long. They only talked about the earthquake. Throughout the day, Gerardo remained glued to the TV and constantly dialed the phone in the hope of establishing a connection. The final blow came in the evening, when it was already getting dark. Ricardo had just arrived home when the familiar footage of the wreckage of a fallen building reappeared on the television screen, but now with a fatal comment. "These are the remains of what used to be the central and northern sections of the Nuevo Leon building, which housed at least 200 families." Ricardo knew that Gerardo and Myria's house was there. After a long silence, Gerardo exclaimed, "I'm going to Mexico City, Ricardo. I can't stay here. If you're going to go, Then you will have to do it by bus. I heard that the airport is closed. Of course, by bus. I'd appreciate it if you could take me to the bus station once I've packed some things. At the bus station, they were informed that flights to Mexico City were suspended for at least the next 24 hours. Only 36 hours after the first earthquake, nature unleashed its fury on Mexico. An aftershock of magnitude 7.3 completely destroyed many damaged buildings. They had to wait 2 more days before Gerardo could get a ticket to Mexico City. On Monday morning, after a 24-hour journey that covered the 1,600 kilometers that separated Juarez from Mexico City, the bus entered the metropolitan area of the Valley of Mexico. Everything seemed normal as far as the eye could see. As they entered the city, the panorama changed. Damaged or destroyed buildings and homes, temporary shelters, and people sitting on the streets or queuing for water and food. Upon arriving at the terminal, he struggled to find a taxi to take him to his mother's house, where he hoped to avoid the destruction common to the worst-hit areas. His mother lived in the Tlalpan delegation in the southwest of the city. When he arrived there, he found no one, but the house and surroundings appeared to be in good condition. After 40 minutes of waiting, his mother appeared with a couple of bags of groceries. He rushed to hug her, unable to utter a word. They entered the house, where he collapsed into his favorite chair. "Where is Jorge?" Gerardo asked. "Jorge is fine. He'll be there in an hour." "What do you know about Mayria?" "We don't know anything about Mayria. You probably know that the Nuevo Leon building collapsed," his mother said with a gesture of concern. "Yes, I know. It became, along with the Hilton Hotel, the most widely covered building in the media after the earthquake. I would like to go see this place as soon as possible." "We'll wait for Jorge. He already went there and saw that the place was cordoned off by the army. Only crews clearing the rubble have access. The panorama is terrible. It's better not to get your hopes up." Half an hour later, Jorge arrived and was surprised to see him. They hugged, and he sat down next to him. Pessimistically, he said, "I have some news. Lists of the wounded, dead, and missing in the various affected areas are being compiled. There is already a preliminary list in the Tlatelolco area, which I had the opportunity to see. Unfortunately, Mayria's name is not there. Of course, much remains to be done, but the race against time seems lost. Only 4 bodies have been recovered in the past 24 hours. The unidentified dead were transported to a makeshift morgue at an adjacent San Francisco hospital. If you want, we can go and have a look tomorrow. I know there are only about 12 dead there." "Okay, we'll go tomorrow. But I would also like to go to SF to see if they know anything." "I understand that the damage to SF was minor," Gerardo said. "Indeed, there is less destruction in this area. First, we can go to SF, which is closer to us, and from there we will go to the hospital. It will take a long time because, as you can imagine, the traffic is crazy." Early the next morning, Gerardo and Jorge got into Jorge's car and drove straight to SF. Upon arrival, they found very few people present as classes had been suspended. The department informed them that there were very few students in the institutions at the time of the earthquake on the 19th, and no one was injured. A small number of students went home to learn about their families. At this time, they have had no reports of injuries or fatalities among SF staff, either students or administrative staff. Frustrated, Jorge and Gerardo went to a San Francisco hospital. They had to park very far away because the access was blocked. Upon arrival, they were informed that only one person could enter the morgue, located in the basement of the hospital. Gerardo asked Jorge to come in as he was starting to feel dizzy and needed to sit down. Jorge knew Mayria well, so he did not expect problems with her identification. It took him 10 minutes to make sure that none of these bodies belonged to Mayria. This brought him temporary relief. Returning home, the panorama looked as bleak as before, since Mayria could very well be buried under rubble that had not yet been cleared away. The main problem was the need to remove the rubble without using machinery, since it could crush anyone who was still alive under the rubble. A week after the disaster, the situation has changed little. Lists of the dead, wounded, and missing were collected in several modules in the city's central park, making them easy to view. Unidentified bodies were collected from better-equipped facilities with information about the location where they were found. Every day, Gerardo visited these places in the hope of finding Maria's body. He was sure that Maria could not be alive at this moment. It seemed as if the earth had simply swallowed her. But on September 30th, 11 days after the earthquake, events took an unexpected turn. Newspapers began to publish all available information about the dead, missing, and wounded. The lists already numbered thousands in every category. Despite his lost hopes, Jorge searched for the name of Maria Galindo Herrera among the wounded anywhere. His surprise was great when he found this name. According to the list, Maria was supposed to be in the Tepeyac hospital, quite far from the Tlatelolco area. Of course, this could be the namesake, since first and last names were very common in Mexico. Gerardo was shocked by the news. They immediately found the exact location of the hospital on a map and planned a route in accordance with the restrictions and closures that were still in effect on many streets in the city. 2 hours later, they found themselves in close proximity to the Tepeyac hospital. They parked the car about 300 meters from the hospital and arrived at the site when it was already getting dark. At the front desk, they were told that there was indeed a woman about 30 years old with that name. They were asked to wait for a nurse to see them, but that only one person could go through. 20 minutes later, a young nurse approached them with a tablet in her hands and asked Gerardo to come with her. They went up to the third floor, where there was a pavilion with 18 beds separated by screens. The nurse stopped and asked Gerardo about his relationship with the patient. "My wife's name is Maria Galindo, and we think she might be here. Maria has been missing since the earthquake happened. I was out of town, and we haven't heard from her since. We assume that she was in the Nuevo Leon building where we lived." "Listen, sir, according to our information, Miss Galindo was rescued from the rubble of the San Cristobal Hotel, the one located at the aqueduct, about a kilometer from here. She was rescued on the 21st in very poor condition. 2 days after hospitalization, doctors had to amputate the leg, which was seriously damaged and became infected, turning into gangrene. She is now out of danger, but appears to have post-traumatic amnesia, as she has no memory of the event. Anyway, you only have 10 minutes to identify her because we're having saturation issues in the hospital, and besides, the patient is under sedatives." Almost in shock, Herman nodded slightly. The nurse took him to bed number 32, where Herman saw an incomplete body covered with a sheet. It was obvious that the left leg was missing. Her face, very pale, had minor injuries. The right eye looked swollen. Coming out of his left arm was a catheter with tubes connected to a bag of fluids. After a few seconds, Herman could barely say, "I'm not sure, nurse. Can you lift the sheet so I can see her leg?" The nurse nodded and lifted the sheet so that her foot and part of her right leg were visible. Herman came closer and carefully examined the foot. He had no doubt it was Maria, his wife. Since there were no chairs, Herman had to sit on the floor, unable to hold back his sobs. The nurse, perhaps because of her youth, was moved by the scene, remaining motionless for several minutes. The scene seemed to be taking place in a funeral home. "Breathe deeply, sir, and exhale slowly," the nurse said. "If you want, I'll bring you a glass of water." "No, everything is fine, thank you. Give me a few more minutes, and then I'll come down." "Okay, sir, I'll wait for you at the front desk." At the reception desk, they took his full details, including his phone number. He was told he could return in 3 days, when he would be told exactly when his wife would be discharged. He was asked to bring a wheelchair and clothes for her. Before leaving, Herman again asked about the place where his wife was found. After checking the case, the administrator confirmed that she was found at the San Cristobal Hotel, located on Aqueduct Boulevard. Returning to his mother's house, Herman's expression was neither sad nor happy. He seemed rather absent. Jorge seemed more optimistic and was the one who explained everything to his mother. Since it was already late, they decided to rest and leave everything for the next day. The next day, at breakfast, Jorge remarked, "Listen, Herman, since you will have to take care of Maria, I think you can bring her here to the house. We have a spare room, and mine will also be available, since I can sleep in the office. I thought so. Once she's fully recovered, we'll decide what to do. For now, I'll look for a wheelchair and crutches. I'll also take this opportunity to sort out some things. What are you going to find out, son? Asked his mother. I'll let you know when the time comes, if you'll excuse me. Would you like me to come with you? Asked Jorge. No need, Jorge, thank you. It might take all day. I'll see you in the evening. You don't need to be a soothsayer to understand what kind of investigation Herman was thinking about. There were two main questions. First, where was Maria? Secondly, what was she doing there? He first went to the Tepeyac hospital and found out where the hotel was located. It turned out that he was a little over a kilometer from the hospital, which explained her ending up there. Arriving at the place, he did not find any hotel. Only the ruins of a building that was once the Hotel San Cristobal. The northern and southern wings of the building remained standing. Two excavators were clearing away the debris with no hope of finding anyone alive. Due to the type of area, it was clear that the San Cristobal Hotel was not for high tourism. Discouraged, he took a taxi to SF in search of more information. The school administration told him that activities were not yet normalized and that they did not have enough information about the students. As for the teaching staff of 35 people, all reported except two teachers. One was known to be at home recovering from minor injuries, but nothing else was known. Herman asked their names and asked to see their photographs. The secretary searched through the file cabinet and pulled out two files, which she placed on the counter. In one of them was the name Francisco Gomez Ramirez, 48 years old. This was the same teacher who was at home. The second file showed the name Mario Ayala Campos, 36, whose whereabouts were unknown. Herman wrote down their addresses and phone numbers, saying he needed them because he was interested in locating a student who may have been in contact with one of them. Before leaving, he was assured that if they found anything about Mario Ayala, they would tell him. On the way home, he remembered that he knew Maria's trainer named Mario, but the name Francisco Gomez meant nothing to him, so the first thing he decided to do was try to find Mario by phone or at home. He called from a payphone but received no answer. Then he decided to take a taxi to Mario's house, located in the Azcapotzalco delegation, a little far from where he was. The place where Mario lived was a modest apartment in a 4-story building that appeared to be undamaged by the earthquake. The room was 331, located on the 3rd floor. After knocking repeatedly and receiving no answer, he decided to ask the next apartment where the voices were coming from. An elderly lady opened the door for him. "Good afternoon, madam. Sorry for the trouble. I'm looking for Mr. Mario Ayala, who I believe lives nearby." "Well, sir, we haven't seen him since the earthquake. He's usually gone for a day or two, but this absence strikes me as odd. We know that he is a sports coach and works for SF, but our relationship with him is limited to greetings. Have you asked SF about him?" "That's where I came from. They don't know anything either. I would be grateful if you see Mario or know anything about him. You would let me know on this phone number. I'm just a friend, but I know his family can't reach him." Herman left the building with the feeling that the puzzle was beginning to come together. He went to the city center, which was still in some chaos. He looked for an orthopedic supply store, but had no luck. Almost all shops were closed. I decided to return to my mother's house. At home, he said only that he went to SF to find out about the resumption of classes and that he went downtown to buy a wheelchair. Later, when Jorge returned, he told him that he had found a used wheelchair and that the crutches would be ready in about 3 days. At dinner, Jorge discussed with Herman and his mother. "Listen, I think you will stay here until Maria is fully recovered. I thought that if you wanted, you could help me with my business. I need someone reliable in accounting and managing suppliers and clients. It will be at a time that suits you best, depending on your wife's condition." "I'm fine with that. Let Maria be discharged, and I'll be more confident in determining the details. What is a fact is that I will stay here with Maria until she is fully recovered. Then I'll see what to do. I'm definitely not going to die in this damn town. I'd rather go somewhere else. 2 days later, Herman went to the hospital to visit Myria. The administration told him that she was feeling much better and could probably be picked up in 2 days. For now, he will only be able to see her for 20 minutes. Worldaya was no longer in the same department. She was transferred to the second floor. He was shown how to get to bed No. 176. With a hesitant step, Herman headed towards this place. The numbers were displayed on the headboard of each bed. Before reaching number 176, he stopped for a moment. He reconsidered his actions and then carefully positioned himself at the edge of the bed, facing the headboard. Myria, who was half asleep with her head raised at 45 degrees, almost screamed when she saw him. "Hello, how are you?" Herman said without moving. "Herman, where have you been?" "I came 3 days ago, but you were under sedatives. Until today, I was allowed one more visit. How do you feel?" "I feel like my leg is missing. You saw me?" "Yes, I already knew about it. The good news is that you are alive. How is your memory?" "Well, not really. Something is wrong with my head. Why don't you come closer? I'm not a leper." Herman came up and took her hand. "In 2 days, you will be discharged. We will live in my mother's house. We already have a ready-made room and a wheelchair. I will not return to Juarez again, and I will start working with Brother Jorge in his business. If you want, I can call your mother in Veracruz to let her know how you are." "Yes, please. Talk to my mom and tell her I'm okay, but don't talk about my leg. I'll explain this to her later." Without further signs of affection, Herman left, leaving Myria in a state of foreboding. She had 48 hours to come up with a plausible story or insist on her amnesia in the hope that everything would be forgotten. Myria's biggest problem was the remaining thread named Mario. 2 days later, carrying a bag of clothes and a wheelchair, Herman returned to the hospital with Jorge. After filling out and signing a bunch of paperwork at the hospital administration, he handed over the chair and clothes to the nurse. 30 minutes later, the nurse returned with Myria in the chair. She was freshly washed and looked very good. She greeted Jorge, whom she had not seen for a long time, and they headed towards the exit. While Jorge walked to the car, Myria took German's hand and said to him, "I don't know what's wrong with you, but you should know that the earthquake did not make any changes in me except in my leg. My love for you remains unchanged. If my current state has changed your feelings for me, I understand. Just say it. Relax, we will have time to talk. Right now, the only thing that matters is your recovery. Your mother already knows about this, but when you get home, you can call her. I know your mother is in a bit of a delicate state of health, so you can decide this yourself." In his mother's house, Myria's room was already ready. There was a full bathroom, 2 single beds, a nightstand, a small dressing table, and an armchair. Arriving at the house, the greeting from Herman's mother was warm but brief. Myria settled into the room and asked for some time to sleep. Herman helped her get settled, brought her water and her medicine. Then he left without saying a word. In the evening, after he brought dinner to Myria, Herman read for several hours. They barely exchanged words. Then he changed his clothes and went to another bed. It took him a long time to fall asleep, as at some moments he was tempted to go and hug his wife. But doubts, which were no longer so great, prevented him from doing this. The next day, he planned to investigate another matter about the mysterious disappearance of Myria. He got up early without waking Myria. He asked his mother to look after her, as he needed to settle some matters. He looked at the map to find the address and headed south of the city in search of Francisco Gomez Ramirez, the last remaining unresolved link in his investigation. It didn't take him long to find the address. It was a modest house located on the outskirts of Xochimilco. After knocking, a woman about 45 years old opened the door. "Good morning, madam. I'm looking for Professor Francisco Gomez." "Please come in. I'll call him now." A few minutes later, a man appeared with a cast on his right arm. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "Good morning, Professor. My name is German Ursua. I'm trying to find a person who has been missing since the earthquake. She was a student at SF, and we don't know anything about her. I was advised to contact you because if she is your student, you may have some information that could help us. Her name is Maria Galindo. Listen, I have a lot of students in different groups. This name is not familiar to me, but let me check my lists. Wait for me a minute. The professor walked away and returned a few minutes later with 8 folders. He gave 4 to Herman and kept the remaining 4 for himself. If you help me check, we will finish faster. The lists are on checkered pages. They are in alphabetical order, except for some names at the end. After 10 minutes of checking, they did not find Maria's name. Have you already asked the SF offices? Yes, but they don't know anything about their students. The entire teaching staff has already reported, except for you and an instructor named Mario Ayala. Do you know him? Yes, I know him by sight, but I have not interacted with him. Was your hand injured in the earthquake? Yes, it was so. I was about to leave the house when the dance began. I fell and landed poorly. It's good that the house survived. Are you related to Maria? I am a friend of her family who are desperate. But to be honest, we have already lost hope. Thank you very much for the information. I hope you get well soon. Herman left without the slightest doubt. The only possible connection between the earthquake and Maria was Mario Ayala, and most likely he died in the dance, as Francisco called it. On the way home, Herman repeatedly planned how he was going to confront Maria. At times, anger and sadness overwhelmed him, but he knew that there was a possibility that his suspicions were unfounded. He will have to act carefully and smartly. The immediate question was when would be the right time for confrontation, given Maria's condition. Perhaps he should have waited as long as possible. 3 weeks passed, accompanied by treatment, medications, and follow-up visits to the hospital. Not surprisingly, she had a quick recovery. Her physical fitness was her main pillar. Herman was able to restrain himself and not confront Maria. They didn't even talk about the past. Maria seemed distant from Herman, as if accepting hidden guilt. But this situation could not last long. The river overflowed one day when Maria, spurred by uncertainty, said to him, "Herman, I don't know what's wrong with you. Your coldness disorients me. If you have something to tell me, I think it's time to say it." Herman did not answer. He closed the bedroom door and sat down on the sofa. After a long silence, he burst out, "On the day of the earthquake, you were not in our apartment. As you well know, almost nothing remains of the Nouveau Leon building. Our apartment was left in ruins. A lot of time has passed, but the rubble has not yet been removed. So the first question to answer is where were you that morning of September 19th? I don't think you don't remember anything. This could happen if you hit your head hard. Where were you on the morning of September 19th? Maria had already prepared an answer for a long time. I remember leaving the house early in the morning, heading to SF because I had to go to the supermarket to buy fruit. On the way out, I went to the bus stop, and here I don't remember anything. I think something hit me and knocked me down." Herman maintained a sullen silence. Then he said, "You are lying. You were found in the ruins of the San Cristobal Hotel. This is the hotel where you spent the night having sex with your former trainer, Mario Ayala. It's a miracle you survived." Having lost his composure, Herman concluded, "I could never imagine that I married a damn sook." Very angry, Herman left, slamming the door. He went to his mother's room and said, "I'll go to Jorge. Don't wait for me. I'll stay there overnight. See you tomorrow. Don't worry about Maria. She'll be fine." Returning to his brother's house, he told him about all of Maria's infidelity. They got drunk and endlessly discussed the future of their marriage. Jorge insisted on the possibility of forgiveness and reconciliation. He advised waiting as long as possible before making a decision. Unfortunately for Herman, the alcohol only added salt to his wounds. The next day, in a calmer mood, Herman said, "Anyway, I would like to start working with you. Maria doesn't require as much attention anymore, and I need to distract myself with other things. Plus, my savings are running low. I need money to complete her therapy and buy her a prosthetic later. So when you say so, we can start. We can start tomorrow. I would like you to be available from 8 o'clock to 15 o'clock. It may be necessary for you to stay a little longer at first, but then this time will be enough. Now I will pay you 25,000 Mexican pesos per week. I may increase this later depending on how sales go this season. I will give you an advance to buy clothes since I see that you don't have many outfits. A little less depressed, Herman returned to his mother's house. He wanted to see Maria's face to see if she had anything to say in her defense, or if she had already silently accepted the reality of her shame. Upon arrival, his mother told him in a quiet voice that Maria had not left her room since he left, and that she had refused to eat. A little alarmed, Herman crept into her room. Maria lay diagonally on the bed, face down. The room smelled of alcohol, and a half-empty bottle of brandy and a plastic cup stuck out on the nightstand. Carefully, Herman checked her breathing and her entire body for injuries, especially her leg. Luckily, everything looked good. Obviously, Maria was completely drunk. This was probably the first binge in her life. Very rarely did she drink beer or any other alcohol with soda. He carefully laid her down on the bed and left, taking the bottle of brandy with him. "Do you have any idea where she got it from?" he asked his mother. "Jorge kept this bottle in the closet for a long time. I don't think she went out to buy it. I didn't notice when she took it." Herman checked the cabinet, making sure that there was indeed no more bottle there. Annoyed, Herman's mother asked, "Now explain to me what's going on here." "Let's go to your room, Mom. I'll explain there." Herman explained in detail what he had discovered and his confrontation with Maria. Herman's mother was not surprised by what she heard. Mixed feelings left her silent for several minutes. Finally, she asked, "What are you going to do?" "I will wait until she is fully recovered and then decide what to do. Most likely, we will get divorced later." At night, having recovered from drunkenness, Gerardo approached Maria. "Did you celebrate something yesterday, or did you confuse brandy with tamarind juice?" Gerardo asked mockingly. Maria was silent. "Alcohol will not help you recover, especially if you are taking medications. If it were cyanide, I would drink it with pleasure." Gerardo became serious and said, "I do not want to quarrel with you. I want you to make a full recovery, and for this, I need your cooperation. Let's see what will happen next." With a broken heart, Maria replied, "There's no point in continuing this nightmare. I've thought it over and asked you one last favor. Buy me a ticket to Veracruz so I can live with my mother. I won't bother you anymore, and you'll never hear from me again. I hope that one day you will forgive me and not hold a grudge. I admit my grave mistake and will never stop regretting it. You don't need to worry about my recovery anymore. You've already done enough, and I'm grateful to you for that." As soon as she finished, Maria burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. There was nothing more to say. She had to escape from there at any cost. If she had both legs, she would run away like in her best days. Gerardo felt great pity when he saw her in such a state. His throat was dry, and he couldn't say anything. Collecting his thoughts, he said, "You're not going anywhere. You are still my wife, and I am not kicking you out. I'm not heartless. Let's try to stay calm until you recover. Besides, you won't be able to continue therapy in Veracruz, and I don't think your mother will be able to help you. I have already started working in my brother's business, and the first thing I will do is buy you clothes and everything you need. So make a list of what you need, and please don't include cyanide in it." Maria realized that she had no choice but to follow Gerardo's instructions. She also realized that the best way to not complicate the situation was to remain silent and allow time to put everything in its place. Time could be her best ally. 3 weeks passed in a somewhat tense but routine environment. A daily routine usually brings calm. Maria continued her therapy at home and was able to go without medication, except for rare occasions when phantom pain bothered her missing leg, a common syndrome among amputees. She got used to the crutches and went for a 25-minute walk every day. Refugio's feelings changed to compassion, as Maria's efforts and perseverance in the face of adversity made him feel touched. Working with his brother, Gerardo quickly mastered all aspects of the business, including those that went beyond it. The most important part of his job was getting to know and communicate with clients and suppliers. He was not an expert in trade relations, but his friendliness and good manners made this task easier for him. 2 months after the earthquake, the city experienced a painful calm. Machines were everywhere, clearing debris or demolishing irreparably damaged buildings. The lists of dead, wounded, and missing had stabilized, but they were far from reality. Four eyes continued to scan these lists, searching for one name. Sometimes there were 6 of them when the newspaper fell into Maria's hands, which did not happen often. But Jorge and Gerardo did not miss a single detail in their search. In the evenings, after dinner and watching the news on TV, Maria and Gerardo went to their room, where they regularly read a book. Dialogues between them were rare, but friendly. They were always good readers, as was Jorge, who had a modest library in his mother's house. After reading, Gerardo went to bed around 10 p.m. since he had to get up early to go to Jorge's office. Maria read for another hour before going to bed. Normality, at least in appearance, has returned. Like any person who has experienced physical trauma, Maria lost her periods and, more importantly, excitement. She couldn't be pregnant because she took her pills very carefully. In any case, any possible pregnancy would have been terminated due to the terrible physical trauma experienced. The next day, upon returning home, already in the room with Maria, he told her, "I understand that your sexual appetite has returned, and of course, you understand that I also have such a problem. I want to make you an offer." Stunned, Maria did not understand what he was getting at. "I don't know what you mean, but you don't have to worry about my needs. You listen to me and then decide." Gerardo paused and continued, "I suggest we have sex, but not like before." Surprised, Maria did not understand what he was getting at. "I do not understand what you're saying. We will have sex, but without showing affection. Purely sex, and only when I say so." Without leaving her amazement, Maria did not know what to answer. She didn't even understand what he meant by pure sex. She realized that this proposal was somewhat humiliating, but it was also true that Gerardo was still her husband and, what was worse, that she had seriously offended him by her adultery. On the other hand, Maria realized that this was a window of opportunity that could help her achieve a final reconciliation. After a couple of minutes, Maria replied, "Okay, I agree to anything." Gerardo took a box of birth control pills from his pants pocket and placed them on the nightstand. "Take these, we can't risk it." 3 days later at night, about 30 minutes after Maria went to bed, Gerardo got out of bed with great agitation. He walked over to Maria's bed and took off the sheet. Maria, a little surprised, knew what this meant. Having sex almost every day became the new normal for them. It also benefited the atmosphere in the house, from a somewhat melancholy state to a calmer atmosphere and a little more dialogue between everyone. On the other hand, Maria made rapid progress in her rehabilitation. She became very accustomed to using crutches, to the point where she only needed to lean on one crutch, the one on her left side, on her missing leg. Her mood was improving, but her inner voice continued to tell her that her story was not over yet. Every day, Maria went for a walk for at least 30 minutes. She came to a small sports park, where the boys' games reminded her of the happy times of her sports life. She remembered Mario with some resentment. In her confused imagination, she came to believe that he was to blame for her misfortune. She seemed to have forgotten that if it had not been for her affair with Mario, she would have been buried in an apartment in the Nouveau Leon building. Or, who knows, there was a possibility that for some reason she was thinking of quitting before 7:19 on that fateful day. Several times during her tour, she took the opportunity to talk to SF on a payphone and ask about Mario. The answer was always the same. Nothing was known about his whereabouts, and apparently no one bothered to report him missing, since he was still not on the official list of missing persons. Everything pointed to the fact that he died without being identified, and perhaps his remains could not even be found. 6 months after the earthquakes, Gerardo was doing a great job. Sales grew, and his advice to Jorge increased profits slightly. One of the aspects of his job that occupied him the most was customer service. Jorge's warehouses supplied about 22 retail stores with fruits and vegetables. Although orders for goods were almost always placed by telephone, Gerardo made a habit of visiting them regularly. These visits fostered a stronger bond with the client through the advice and suggestions Gerardo gave to improve their sales, from product presentation to suggestions on how to paint the front of the store and how to design and place appropriate signage. One of these clients was a mid-sized company called Finality, run by a woman named Letitia, better known simply as Letty. She was a woman of about 50, sociable and friendly. In her youth, she must have been a very beautiful woman. Her sensual lips and ample breasts left no room for doubt. Widowed for 7 years and with 3 sons, she had to take over the business her husband had just started. In the greengrocer's shop, she had 1 or 2 assistants, depending on the season. The assistants were usually teenagers who were constantly changing. If for some reason she couldn't come to work, the greengrocer would simply remain closed. Her presence was vital to the smooth running of the business. Gerardo had a very good relationship with Letty. He enjoyed her always cordial and lively conversation. Perhaps for this reason, he was especially flexible when Letty delayed payments and extended deadlines. He knew that she was always good at her payments anyway. One day, while visiting a greengrocer, Gerardo found a young woman with Letty. She was about 30 years old, of average height and very pleasant appearance. Dressed modestly, with large black eyes and a 4-centimeter scar across her left eyebrow. Her bulging breasts were exposed, despite her closed blouse. What struck her most was the resemblance to Letty. She was probably her daughter or niece. "Good morning, is Mrs. Letty home?" "Hello, good afternoon. My mother couldn't come now, I'm replacing her. Can I help you? I'm your supplier, and I'm here to see if you need anything." "Oh, you must be Gerardo. My mother left me a list of what we were missing. I have it here." The girl leaned over, looking for the list, and this movement allowed Gerardo to appreciate the top of her large, firm breasts. "Here it is. The first 3 things are what we need the most. The rest can wait another 5 days. My mother asked me to tell you that payment for last week's items will be due on your next visit if you do not do so. I don't mind. There are no problems with payment. We can wait. Is your mom sick?" "No, she is not sick. I'm just learning to deal with it so she can get some rest. In fact, I will replace her on Saturdays and Sundays, and during the week I will come in a few days later. Help her. What is your name?" "Rebecca Grajales, at your service." "Listen, Rebecca, I'll leave you my card with my details for everything you need. Anyway, I come every 2 weeks. I will send you a complete list of goods tomorrow. We will be very thankful." Gerardo would have liked to continue the conversation, but he couldn't find a suitable excuse. He decided to leave to avoid misinterpretation. Moreover, he also had the feeling that Rebecca was or was married. Since he became engaged to Myril, he has not been interested in any woman. It seemed that Rebecca might be an exception, although it was too early to believe that someone would be able to break through the wall of his feelings for Myria. On the other hand, Rebecca was a real unknown. He knew absolutely nothing about her. Everything had to be taken very quietly. The thought of another disappointment makes his stomach twist into knots. Gerardo's next visits to Letty's fruit store took place on Saturdays every 2 weeks. From time to time, he alternated his visits during the week to hide his interest in Rebecca and to be able to say hello to Letty. After 2 months, he had no doubt that his enthusiasm for Rebecca was genuine, and he decided to take the next step. During one of his visits, he told her about this. "Rebecca, I'd like to invite you to lunch or dinner one of these days." Rebecca looked at him, assessing his intentions, and answered, "I would accept breakfast on weekdays. It's more difficult for me during the day and evening." "It's okay, Rebecca. Do you know the restaurant Del Bosque in Coyocan?" "Yes, I saw it, but I've never been inside." "This is a very good restaurant. What do you say we will meet there next Wednesday at 9 o'clock? Everything is fine. Just give me some time to get there because I don't know the way. I could pick you up at your house if you want, but I'll have to make a long detour. It's not necessary or convenient. See you there. When Gerardo left, the expression uncomfortable continued to run through his head. She thought that she probably didn't want him to know about her home. On Wednesday, after receiving the newspaper, Gerardo arrived early at the Del Bosque restaurant, where there were very few people. He sat down at a table a little away and told the waiter that he was waiting for someone else to serve him orange juice. Since he suspected that Rebecca would be late, he started reading the newspaper. To his surprise, Rebecca appeared 10 minutes later, almost unrecognizable. With light makeup, a dark blue blouse with a small cut that allowed her to show off her top charms, a blue dress that fell just below her knees, and sandals that allowed her to show off her slender legs. This is what attracted Gerardo's attention most of all. Her legs were beautiful, like Maria's. "Hello, Rebecca, how beautiful you look. Thank you. I don't think I was too late, but I had to leave a little after 8. Here's the menu. There's a lot of choices. Take a look, and if you want, we can order it." Rebecca didn't know most of the dishes, so she chose an option almost at random. After 10 minutes, the waiter returned with their order. Gerardo had a hard time looking away from Rebecca's cleavage, which did not escape her attention. At the end of breakfast, when only cups of coffee remained on the table, Gerardo took the floor. "Rebecca, I won't beat around the bush and hide my intentions. In the short time that I have known you, you have captivated me with your character and demeanor. As if that weren't enough, I really like you. I am not asking you to become my girlfriend, but I am asking you to give me the opportunity to get to know you better and meet regularly, at least once a week. Time will tell if we can achieve something more, but I think we have a chance." Rebecca looked at him for a few seconds. She slowly lifted her cup of coffee and took a small sip. "Let me guess. You're married," Rebecca said ironically. A little surprised, Gerardo repeated the same ritual with a cup of coffee and replied, "Yes, married. In a marriage that is almost broken, although we have no children. That's why I'm not asking you to be my girlfriend. I want us to have a close relationship that will allow us to get to know each other well while I solve my family problems. I can't tell you more, but I assure you that I don't want to hurt anyone, not you or my wife. I will make the appropriate decisions in due time." Rebecca was surprised by the honesty that was unusual for a man talking about his marital status. She had always thought that a married man courting another woman must be cynical and lacking moral restraint. "I appreciate and admire your honesty. I like you and I have no problems with this kind of relationship." Rebecca paused for a long time, as if gathering strength, and continued, "I also want to be very honest and tell you one dark story from my past. You may change your mind when I'm done." Surprised, Gerardo replied, "At this point in my life, nothing can scare me anymore, Rebecca. You can tell me everything. I'll understand." Rebecca continued, "I am 30 years old and I live in my mother's house. 10 years ago, I got involved with the wrong people. As a result, I went to prison for possession and trafficking drugs. I spent almost a year there. When I came out, I was 3 months pregnant. I returned to live with my parents, who supported me until my son was born. 2 years later, my father died of a heart attack, and my mother was forced to take over the business. My sister Maria, who was divorced and had a son, also lived in the house. Maria worked in a shoe store, and I took care of the children and the house." Rebecca made a long and unpleasant pause, which Gerardo was forced to interrupt. "It's not a problem for me, Rebecca. The fact that you were in prison and had a child doesn't change my interest in you. You did not understand me. I don't have a son. I had a son. In the past, my son Alberto died in an earthquake when the school he went to collapsed." Gerardo was stunned. The shadow of the damned earthquake made itself felt again. With difficulty, he was able to say, "I'm sorry, Rebecca. I'm so sorry." Rebecca added, "My son Alberto and my nephew Ernesto went to different and distant schools. In the morning, I took them there. First, their son, who could be received from 7 in the morning, and then Ernesto later. I left Alberto shortly after 7 that day. When I got on the bus to take Ernesto, we were hit by an earthquake. Nothing happened to us, but Alberto's school collapsed, killing 9 children who had already arrived. If the earthquake had occurred later, there would have been hundreds of deaths. Gerardo was silent, feeling extremely uncomfortable. He couldn't find the words to continue the conversation. I don't know what to tell you, Rebecca, but what you told me doesn't change my intentions. And he added, I also carry within me a deep wound left by the earthquake, but now is not the time to talk about it. After a long silence, Rebecca said, Well, I think it's time for us to go. If you allow me, I would like to ask you one last question. Ask, what happened to the father of your child? My son's father was in prison twice. The second time he died during an internal dispute in prison. After a pause, Rebecca finished. I lost all contact with these people. Some of them are still in prison, some are dead, and some have simply disappeared. Gerardo had heard enough. He asked for the bill, and they left the restaurant. He felt awkward and worried. He had the feeling that this was his first and last meeting with Rebecca. Rebecca, I would like to take you home. We could take a taxi if you want. No, Gerardo, everything is fine. You can call me a taxi, but I'll go alone. I hope you understand me. Good, let it be your way. 5 minutes later, a taxi stopped. Before approaching him, Rebecca turned and said, Thank you for the invitation, Gerardo. I hope this is not the last. Gerardo breathed a sigh of relief. He will see her again. On the way home, a variety of thoughts were spinning in his head. He couldn't get them in order. Before coming home, he went into a small tavern next to the house, which was empty at that time. He ordered a beer and began to put his thoughts in order. It was clear that the first thing he needed to do was close the chapter of his life with Myria. The last thing he planned to do for her was to get her a prosthetic leg. He had already searched for information and selected 2 orthopedic stores that offered different models of prosthetic legs. This was what he needed to focus on. When he came home, he found neither Myria nor his mother. He called the 2 orthopedic supply stores he had chosen, took some notes, and made an appointment at one of them for the next day. When Myria and his mother returned from shopping, Gerardo told them, Tomorrow we have an appointment at 10 o'clock at the orthopedic store to look at prosthetic legs. This is a store with a wide selection of models. I don't think I need prosthetics. I'm already well accustomed to crutches. There won't be anything wrong if we look and try. If you can't get used to it, you just won't use it. But I want you to have this opportunity. Not very confident, the next day Myria went with Gerardo to an orthopedic store. 10 minutes after arriving, they were taken to a room where a technician, asking many questions, explained everything about prosthetics and their options. One option was a new model made of titanium and other plastic materials. It was durable, lightweight, and versatile. Its price was high, but not the most expensive. They let her see it. She couldn't try it on because the sizes were customized. She was also shown other, more economical models of prostheses. After 15 minutes, Myria chose the first option. She was transferred to a special room, where a cast was taken from the stump. She was weighed, photographed, and measured various parts of the body. At the end, they were informed that the prosthesis would be ready in a week. She was warned that adjustment could take up to 2 months, and that she would have to return frequently for necessary monitoring. Given her youth and strength, she was assured that the adaptation process could be much faster. Gerardo and Myria returned home with great optimism, but for different reasons. Gerardo knew that his moral obligation to his wife was almost fulfilled. Myria, on the other hand, believed that the chances of a complete reconciliation had increased. She had her doubts, but she mentally prepared herself for any scenario, including the possibility of sharing Gerardo with another woman. For now, she felt more confident as her mobility had significantly recovered. In addition, the prosthesis will help her aesthetically, although she realized that lameness would always accompany her. A week later, Myria took her first steps with her new leg. The stump was ideal for attaching the prosthesis. They were given a manual with precise instructions for rehabilitation exercises. Her worn-out left shoe finally found a place to work. Meanwhile, Rebecca kept her meetings with Gerardo completely secret. She didn't want to cause her mother any more trouble. She had already made her go through many bitter moments because of her past life. Now it was time to give her peace. If her relationship with Gerardo works out, then she will talk about it. So far, she didn't even want to leave the house unless she had to. And coming home late wasn't a good idea either. For the first time, Rebecca had a normal partner or boyfriend. Her previous partners were, one way or another, conflict-ridden people of low social status. Gerardo was completely different, well-mannered, honest, kind, hard-working, and, on top of everything else, handsome. She was undoubtedly falling in love. The best proof of this was that her old bitterness was dissolving into memory. Perhaps except for the loss of her child. She wasn't going to miss this opportunity to rebuild her life because it might be her last chance. After 2 months of meetings with Gerardo, one Wednesday, after breakfast, she said to him, "Gerardo, I would like you to take me to the cinema tonight if you have time." Surprised by the invitation, Gerardo replied, "Of course, I only need to reschedule my visits until today. Which cinema do you want to go to, and what movie do you want to watch?" "To any cinema and for any film. I need a little distraction." "Great, let's look at the posters. We'll buy a newspaper and see what they show." They bought a newspaper on the street and checked the posters. With some naivety, Gerardo suggested, "Here, at the Minerva Cinema, they are showing the film Out of Africa, which I have not seen yet. I was told that this is a very good film. What do you think?" "Great, it suits me. What time does it start?" "It starts at 4 o'clock. We have time. I would like to come into the office to reschedule my appointments and resolve other issues. If you want, we can meet at the cinema entrance shortly before 4. Do you know where the cinema is?" "Yes, I was there once. And I also need to go back to the fruit store." 15 minutes before 4, Gerardo was already at the entrance to the cinema with tickets in hand. At 4 o'clock, Rebecca arrived, looking even more beautiful than before. The neckline of her blouse was a little wider than usual when she was dating Gerardo. Her makeup was light but well applied. Her beautiful feet were in mid-heeled shoes instead of the sandals that Gerardo liked so much. The weather, a little rainy, was not suitable for sandals. She also put on a raincoat in case the weather got worse. As expected, they sat next to each other at the cinema. 20 minutes into the film, Rebecca took Gerardo's hand and he responded with a squeeze. Minutes later, Rebecca turned to him and kissed him on the lips. Gerardo's reaction was immediate. He put his right hand around her shoulder and with his left grabbed the back of her head, deepening this unexpected but long-awaited kiss. They sat motionless for the rest of the movie, not paying much attention to him. Just before the end of the film, Rebecca came close to Gerardo's ear and said, "I want you to take me to the hotel." Gerardo's erection was noticeable. He had to wait a few minutes after the movie ended to get up and hug Rebecca. On the street, Gerardo stopped a taxi and talked to the driver. A few moments later, Gerardo called Rebecca to get into the car. 15 minutes later, the taxi stopped in front of the Los Abejas Hotel. It was a modest hotel located on a beautiful street lined with ash trees. Gerardo and Rebecca, without saying a word, holding hands, climbed to the third floor and headed towards the room. Inside, Gerardo stood waiting for Rebecca's first move. Rebecca let go of his hand and walked around the room, as if looking for something. Gerardo did not move. 2 minutes later, Rebecca came and stood in front of Gerardo. "First of all, you should know that I think about you all day. We can't remain just friends." Rebecca slowly took off her blouse. Then she took off her bra, revealing her firm, bulging breasts. Pausing, she took off her skirt. Then she took off his trousers and shoes. They had sex. Gerardo did not let Rebecca go after the act. Since the room was a little cold, they covered themselves with a blanket, still hugging. 20 minutes later, Rebecca said, "Gerardo, I would like to stay all day, but I need to leave. I don't want to worry my mother by being late." "It's okay, we can leave now." On the street, Rebecca asked, "When will we see each other again?" "If everything depended on me, tomorrow." I would like to too, but it's impossible. I think I can only meet next Wednesday here. Preferably in the morning, Rebecca added. Well, I'll have to wait a long time, but so be it. What do you say about 10 o'clock in the morning? Okay, it's a deal. I need you to give me your phone number in case I need to contact you. You can call me at Jorge's office as if you were going to place an order for a product. Returning home, Gerardo reflected on his sex life with Myria, which happened almost daily. If he continues to have sex with Rebecca, sooner or later, she will ask him about his sex life with Myria. He could lie and say he didn't touch her anymore, and she wouldn't notice if he didn't handle Rebecca too often. As for Myria, who was already used to daily sex, he didn't need to give her an explanation. It was clear that her sexual activity was determined by him and no one else. The question of separation and divorce remained. If he wants something more with Rebecca, he will have to divorce Myria. There was no other choice. He needed to consult a lawyer. He remembered Antonio Zermino, a former school friend. Antonio was a lawyer, and they sometimes met and were friends. He remembered that Antonio gave him his business card with details of the office where he worked. Apparently, this business card got lost, so he will have to look up the phone number in the directory. The next day at work, Gerardo started looking for Antonio's phone. He soon found him and called him immediately. Good morning, Antonio. It's me, Gerardo Urias. Hello, Gerardo. What a miracle it is to hear from you. I have a legal issue that needs to be discussed. I don't know if we can meet to talk about this. Of course, you can come to the office and we will discuss everything. What is it about? I want to get a divorce. God, I remember your marriage seemed perfect. Appearances can be deceiving, Antonio, at least for a while. Well, look, I need you to bring all your details and a copy of your marriage certificate. With this, we will begin drawing up a claim. Well, we're already starting off on a bad foot. All my documents were buried under the rubble of the building where we lived. I don't have copies of the recordings. It's a miracle we survived. I'll tell you later. Oh God, I didn't know that. Don't worry, we will find another way. In which civil registry did you get married? In the civil registry of Iztapalapa. Very good, let me check, and then I will contact you to confirm the meeting. I don't do divorces, but I will refer the case to the right person. After he gave the office number, they said goodbye, clarifying other information. 2 days later, Antonio called Gerardo. Hello, Gerardo, I have news. I don't know if they are good or bad. What happened, Antonio? What is it about? The Iztapalapa Civil Registry building burned down during last year's earthquake. There are no records left. Surprised, Gerardo exclaimed. This can't be. Aren't there backups elsewhere? No, this is not accepted. The fact is that legally you are free, just like your wife. You don't need to get a divorce. Wow, I never would have thought. I understand. You don't have children? You're right, we don't have children. Why do you ask? Because if they were, your wife could go to court with a request to restore the marriage certificate on the basis of the collapse of the civil registry. This would be a long and difficult process as it would require an investigation. In fact, you don't have to have children. If your wife insists on proof that you were married, this process will also be an option. But if divorce is the default, there is no point in getting involved. You simply break up and legally remain single. You have never been married. After a short pause, Gerardo remarked, I think this is good news. I don't think Myria would want to go that far. So we'll leave it at that and see what happens. Fine. If you need anything, get back to me. Anyway, we should meet. There are many other things to talk about. After he hung up the phone, a thought appeared in Gerardo's head. The damned earthquake destroyed my marriage, and the blessed earthquake gave me back my bachelor life. God plays with me like a cat plays with a mouse. And yes, the stars were aligned in Gerardo's favor. 3 weeks after meeting Rebecca, he received a call from Ricardo in Ciudad Juarez. Gerardo and Ricardo kept in touch and often called each other. Ricardo knew everything that happened after the earthquake, although without details. He knew that Gerardo had not lost interest in moving to Juarez, and that was the reason for his call. Hello, Gerardo. How are you? Hello, Ricardo. I'm not complaining. Do you still want to move? Yes, now more than ever. Well, I have news for you. An American company called Pacific Industrial Building, which is engaged in the installation, operation, and transfer of industrial buildings, is looking for bilingual engineers. This company operates in different parts of the border, especially in Juarez and El Paso. You can live here in Juarez since the operations center is here, but you will have to move as needed. The good thing is that the salary and benefits are good. Since I know that you speak English well, you will not have any problems getting a job immediately. You will interact with American technicians and participate in technical training programs for Mexican technicians. I think this is a very good opportunity. Enthusiastic, Gerardo replied, "This is very timely. It's time to make a decision, and this offer suits me perfectly. I can go for an interview next week. What do you think?" "Okay, Gerardo, let me know when you arrive." It's time to turn the black page of your life. He wasn't going to miss the moment. Maria had already recovered, his legal ties to her had disappeared, his relationship with Rebecca was becoming stronger, and now this opportunity arose to return to Ciudad Juarez. Rebecca was far from the sex bomb that Maria was, but Gerardo really liked her orgasms. He had already reduced the frequency of his sexual relations with Maria to twice a week, but he knew that this had to end as soon as possible. In fact, Maria already suspected that something bad was happening, but she had no choice but to endure it. 10 months after the earthquake, after another passionate session of sex with Rebecca, Gerardo decided to shake Maria once again. Arriving home after he had taken a bath, had dinner, and was already alone in his room, he uttered the fatal phrase, "Maria, we need to talk." Recalling her time as a 400-meter runner, feeling like she was at the finish line, Maria took a deep breath and replied, "Tell me what you want, I'm ready." "I am returning to Juarez because I received a job offer. I'm leaving next week and will be back in 10 days. Then I'll come back, pack all my things, and never come back. I hope I can rebuild my life there." He paused and continued, "You can stay here with my mom for as long as you want. We will continue to support you financially." The remaining 50 meters to the finish were absolutely excruciating. Maria took a deep breath again and was able to say, "We won't get a divorce. It won't be necessary. The civil registry where we got married burned down on the day of the earthquake. There were no records left and no assurances were given. Legally, you and I are alone. Single people don't get divorced." Maria was exhausted. She thought she would fall before the finish line. One last breath allowed her to say, "Okay, I wish you all the best. I am very grateful to you and your family for everything you have done for me. I hope one day you will remove the poison from your soul and forgive me. Leave me alone, please." Suddenly shocked by Maria's answer, Gerardo left the room. In a hurry, he left the house and burst into tears. He walked in any direction. He didn't think it would affect him so much. The earthquake caused by Maria was capsizing, but there was no turning back. The decision was made. Rebecca's picture came to his aid. Either it was her or it was Maria. There were no other options. From her room, Refugio noticed that something serious was happening. She went out and knocked on the door of Maria's room. She carefully opened it and entered. Maria was curled up on her bed. She imagined what had happened and chose to leave. She'll talk to both of them tomorrow. After walking a couple of kilometers, Gerardo saw a public telephone and decided to call Jorge. "Hey, Gerard, what's wrong?" "Sorry for the time, brother. I need to talk to you. Get yourself some tequila. I'm on my way." "Well, I'm waiting for you." Half an hour later, he arrived at Gerardo's office. After a couple of tequilas, he told him everything, including his relationship with Rebecca. "It seemed rather strange to me that you went to Letty so often. I understand now. I'm really sorry for Maria. I'm really attached to her. I thought you were on the road to reconciliation. But, you know, one nail knocks out another nail. That is life." Jorge added, "I want to ask you, if you are going to leave, to help me find a replacement for you. I don't know anyone who could take your position, but perhaps you know someone. I don't know who could be suitable for us, but I will find out and let you know. For now, I'll spend the night here. Tomorrow, we'll see what to do. 3 more tequilas, and they went to bed. The next day after dinner, when Gerardo returned home, he found his mother with a disapproving expression on her face, just like in childhood when they did pranks. Maria was still in her room and had not come out or eaten anything since the previous day. His mother asked him to come to her room to talk. Gerardo, you know I don't like interfering in your life or anyone else's, but this time I will ask you to listen to me. First tell me what Maria told you. Gerardo answered, same as you, that you are going to Ciudad Juarez and that their separation is final. There will be no need to get divorced. Okay, I'm listening to you. I'm sure Maria loves you. I don't condone her mistakes, but I know, and you know too, that Maria is worth fighting for. I have never seen such a lively, optimistic, and generous person. She withstood her misfortune and all your contempt and did not give up. It's not fair that you want to throw her away like a dirty rag. It's not fair. The past is in the past. You must learn to forgive, Gerardo. As soon as she finished, Gerardo exclaimed, so generous that she spread her legs in front of another bastard without a second thought. I will never forget this. I just cannot. Call me what you want, but I can't forgive her. And he continued, put yourself in my shoes. If my father cheated on you, would you forgive him? And I understand that women can forgive because you are used to it, and that's how you were taught. For a man, it's much more difficult. Dona Refugio was silent, but then asked, is there another woman? Yes, there is, but that's a different matter. And you love her? Yes, I'm in love with her. Lost in thought, Dona Refugio managed to mutter, a lost battle. Gerardo went to bed late, hoping that Maria was already asleep. Without making a sound, he undressed and went to bed. He couldn't sleep until late at night and didn't hear the slightest sound from Maria's bed. When he woke up, he got up, changed his clothes, and slipped out of the house. He left the house in search of a telephone booth. The closest one was 3 blocks away. He dialed Letty's grocery store, where he hoped to find Rebecca. After 3 rings, he heard, hello, good afternoon. Rebecca, it's me, Gerardo. Frightened, Rebecca replied, did something happen, Gerardo? Nothing wrong, but I need to meet you as soon as possible. Today, if it is very important, but better tomorrow afternoon. Today, where can we meet? At Los Abellas, at normal times. Agreed, see you there. Gerardo did not return home. He headed straight to Jorge's office to complete various matters. Hours later, he stood in front of the Los Abellas hotel, waiting for Rebecca. 30 minutes after 4, Rebecca arrived a little hastily. Sorry, I couldn't leave earlier. What's happening? I need to update you on some issues. Let's go inside and I'll tell you. Once in the hotel room, Gerardo said, sit down and listen to what I tell you. I live in my mother's house with Maria, my wife. The earthquake destroyed our apartment and there was nothing left. We lost everything. It also finally ended our marriage. Someday I'll tell you the details. Our plans were to move to Ciudad Juarez, where I had good job opportunities, but that also fell through. So I started working with my brother Jorge to raise some money and try to rebuild my life. My goal was to get a divorce, leaving Maria some money. As a result of the earthquake, she received serious injuries, which partially immobilized her. That's why I couldn't leave her. Gerardo paused, waiting for the question. What happened to your wife? She lost her leg. Stunned, Rebecca couldn't find anything to say. And how is she now? She is in the process of rehabilitation. I bought her a prosthesis, and she is much better. And Gerardo continued, in any case, our marriage was over. When I was about to start divorce proceedings, the lawyer asked me for my marriage certificate. Obviously, we didn't have one. Everything was lost. We lived in the Nuevo Leon building. Another long pause, and Rebecca no longer wanted to say anything. She was almost in shock. The lawyer told me that the civil registry where I got married burned down during the earthquake, and there were no records left. Everything was destroyed by fire. That's why I couldn't get a divorce. I'm legally single, and so is Myria, of course. Are you saying that you are already free? Exactly. And Myria agreed. Yes, she had no other choice. Mixed feelings briefly filled Rebecca's head. It was impossible for her not to feel sympathy for Myria. I don't understand why you want to leave your wife or partner, whatever you want to call her. Is this related to her disability? Of course not. I don't have a heart of stone. This is for a different reason. I'd like to know her. The bitch betrayed me, and I couldn't forgive her for it. And don't ask me about it anymore. I don't think you need details. If Rebecca was stunned, she was now entering a state of hypnosis. She couldn't say anything more. After long minutes, she finally expressed herself. I think we should go. Too many emotions for one day. I'm not finished yet. Can't be. Is there anything else? Yes, but this is good news. There's a good job offer in Ciudad Juarez that I'm going to consider in a couple of days. If it suits me and everything looks like it will, I'll accept the offer. I don't think about staying and living in this city. No more. Stunned, Rebecca could barely exclaim. And, as soon as I get a suitable place, I will come back for you and we will get married there. Rebecca came out of her hypnosis. She couldn't say anything, she just threw herself into Gerardo's arms. While crying, Rebecca was able to say, I don't want to stay in this city either. At times I think I hate him. If it weren't for this city and its misfortunes, we would not have met. It's always been like this. This city beats us and then hugs us. Exhausted with feelings, they left the hotel hugging each other. They took a taxi to the grocery store. On the way, Gerardo remembered Jorge's request. Rebecca, now that I'm leaving, Jorge will need someone to replace me. The problem is that he doesn't have reliable people who can replace me. Do you know any potential candidates? What requirements should they have? Knowledge of basic accounting and administration is preferred. The rest is working with suppliers and clients. It sounds easy, but it's not. Not all clients are like you and Letty. I think I have a possible candidate for you, but he is not young. There are no age requirements. Who are we talking about? My Uncle Sebastian, my mother's brother. He has been unemployed since the earthquake. He worked for a company that produced clothes. The company went bankrupt as a result of the earthquake. He knows sales and accounting, also understands computers, inventory management, and so on. He is almost 50 years old. That's fine for me. When can I meet him? Now, when I come home, I will tell my mother everything. We have nothing to hide. I will take the opportunity to tell her about a possible job for my uncle and ask her to contact him. It will be quick, I'll let you know. It suits me that you tell your mother everything about us. You can tell her that I'm divorced, but I wouldn't want you to tell her the details of my marriage or Myria's unhappiness. Don't worry, it won't be necessary. For the first time, they left Los Abellos without a taste of the honey of sex. The cascade of events required quick responses. After escorting Rebecca to her home, Gerardo went to his brother's office. He brought it to the chickens, sat down, and told him about a possible replacement. After listening to him, Jorge said, Perfect. When will we meet? Rebecca agreed to talk to me. Then I'll let you know to arrange a meeting. Returning home, Gerardo avoided being alone with Myria. He didn't want any more scenes that would only add salt to the wounds. Myria also didn't want to hear about Gerardo. Everything was clear, so she went to bed early. The next day, at the office, Gerardo received a call from Rebecca, notifying him of her uncle's interest in taking his position. They agreed to meet Sebastian that afternoon at the grocery store. Uncle Sebastian looked to be about 60 years old, although he was only 48. He was dressed modestly, and his face showed great concern. After 15 minutes of conversation, Gerardo had no doubt that this was the right person. Among other things, he liked that he had 3 years of experience with PCS, which was new at the time. They agreed to meet the next day at Jorge's office so he could get to know him. Sebastian had a different expression as he said goodbye. The next day, in Jorge's office, Gerardo shared his impressions of Sebastian. "Well, if you approve of it, I have no problem accepting it. And if possible, I would like you to begin his training from today." When Sebastian arrived, Gerardo brought him to the office and introduced him to Jorge. They talked for half an hour, mostly explaining the functions he would have to perform. Sebastian always showed interest. Suddenly, Jorge asked him, "What are you doing now?" It was a question Rebecca's uncle didn't want to hear. After several eternal seconds, he replied, "A bricklayer." Surprised, Jorge exclaimed, "Sorry?" "Yes, a mason. Since I lost my job as a result of the earthquake, I have not been able to find a job in my field. The work that is now in abundance is cleaning garbage collection and home repairs." Touched, Jorge blurted out, "Well, it's over, Sebastian, you're accepted. If you have no problems, today we will begin your training with Gerardo. I can even give you an advance if you want." Startled, Sebastian could barely say, "You don't know how grateful I would be to you. I have a lot of debts. Of course, I am at your disposal to begin right now." Gerardo invited Sebastian to have lunch in the adjacent dining room. There he explained to him in more detail about the suppliers and clients. They then returned to the office to show him all the documents relating to the administration and accounting of the business. That night, at the end, Sebastian said to him, "At some point, I will transfer all this to the computer. It's a matter of deciding whether to buy it or whether it's worth it. The future is moving in this direction." As he said goodbye, Gerardo knew the business was in good hands. They will meet again the next day, although there is little time left to teach him. 3 days later, in a room at the Los Abejas Hotel, after furious sex, Gerardo confirmed to Rebecca that in 2 days he would leave for Ciudad Juarez and that he would return in 10 days. Rebecca asked, "How are things at home?" "The atmosphere is like a funeral home. My mother is upset with my decision." "Does she know about us?" "Not really, but she knows I'm with someone." "And she probably already told your ex." I don't think she wants to finish her off completely." Gerardo continued, "I want you to be ready because there's a good chance that when I come back, I might take you with me. Tell your mother to find a replacement for you, but if you want, I can wait and come back for you another time. If I could, I would go with you today. I think about you all the time. I need to be with you 24 hours a day." These words excited Gerardo again. He had busy sex with Rebecca. Exhausted, they remained hugging each other without saying a word. Half an hour later, they left the hotel. They took a taxi to Rebecca's house, arriving late in the evening. "Rebecca, I don't think we'll see each other until I return from Juarez. I plan to leave the day after tomorrow. I have some business to take care of." "Will you call me to confirm that you are leaving?" "Certainly. And don't worry, everything will be fine." 2 days later, at home, Gerardo finished packing 2 suitcases under the evasive and sad gaze of the one who was the love of his life. When it was time to leave, Gerardo carried the suitcases to the door and looked towards the dining room, where Maria and his mother were sitting, silently watching him. With a parched throat, he was able to say, "See you in 10 days." His mother replied, "Take care, good luck." Maria could barely say, "Goodbye, Gerardo, thank you for everything." When he got into the taxi, he was overcome with deep sadness. He had a feeling that he would never see Maria again. He didn't understand his sadness. He was supposed to have gotten over it. He opened the taxi window to get some extra oxygen to help him relax. Finally, the image of Rebecca came to his aid, bringing him some peace. When he arrived in Ciudad Juarez 24 hours later, his spirits were restored. He went to Ricardo's house, who was already waiting for him. They greeted each other very emotionally. Ricardo understood the nightmare that his friend had experienced in recent months, but he did not know many details, nor about his relationship with Rebecca. "What's your plan, Gerardo?" Tomorrow, I will report to the company you suggested, Pacific Industrial Building, or PIB as it is also called. Yes, exactly. I can give you a ride when I go to work. It won't be far. How do you plan to dress? Every day. Or do you think I need a suit and tie? On the contrary, here, I think the most appropriate clothing is casual. The next day, Gerardo reported to the PIB Human Resources Department. They were located in one of the city's main industrial corridors. Relaxed, he waited for the reception. He was given a form to fill out the application. 15 minutes later, he was transferred to an interview with a plant engineer, to whom he spoke in detail about his experience and professional interests. After 20 minutes, he was handed over to a lady who assessed his knowledge of the English language. It took them no more than 10 minutes to give it the green light. Finally, at the reception, he was told that in a couple of days, they would inform him of the result of his application. He gave them Ricardo's home number, asking them to provide a number to contact in case of any problems. He came out happy and relaxed, although he did not let his guard down. He bought a newspaper and went to Ricardo's house. The first thing he did was call his mother to let him know. Strangely, his mother did not answer. He then called Rebecca and told her that he had already completed the interview and would hear back in 2 days. Rebecca said, "I already told my mother everything about us, and she was very surprised. She said that she was very attached to you because you were always attentive to her. I was a little jealous of her." Gerardo laughed, as he had not laughed for a long time. He replied jokingly, "Tell your mother that if you do not agree to marry me, I will ask her to marry me. So, you've already been warned." 2 days later, he received a call from PIB. He was informed that he had been accepted and that he should appear to discuss the details as soon as possible. The next day, at PIB's HR department, he was briefed on the details of his recruitment. The salary, for starters, will be MXN 150,000 per month, 2 weeks of vacation per year, and other benefits. If all goes well, his salary will be increased to MXN 200,000 per month. He was supposed to start working in 2 weeks, but he needed to sign the papers now. He thought for a moment and signed. He knew that at first it would be very difficult for them to pay him a higher salary, but for now it was not bad. On the way back to Ricardo's house, he bought a bottle of tequila and something to eat. Upon arrival, he discovered that Ricardo was accompanied by a very young woman. At best, she was 22 years old. She was petite, but had a very graceful appearance. "Hello, Gerardo. Let me introduce you to my future wife, Elizabeth." "Good afternoon, Elizabeth. Nice to meet you." "Hi, Gerardo. Nice to meet you." "What are we going to celebrate, Gerardo?" "First, I'll mention that you're getting married, and then that I've just been hired at PIB." Already relaxed, after a few drinks, Ricardo said, "Gerardo, Elizabeth wants to tell you something if you are still interested in renting the house, because you said that you are planning to bring Rebecca." Elizabeth intervened, saying, "My dad is in real estate and has several apartments available here in the Loma Linda area. One of them is furnished with 2 rooms. I can talk to my dad so he can show them to you." "Well, I'm interested in this. In the newspaper that I have here, I have already noted several places that seemed interesting to me. We can watch them whenever we want." Elizabeth took the phone and contacted her father. They agreed that she would pick up the keys the next day to show Gerardo the apartment. The next day, Elizabeth took Gerardo, and they went to look at the apartments. The furnished apartment was a secondary one with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a dining room, a living room, and a small courtyard. The other apartments were similar, but without furniture. He didn't think twice about it and told Elizabeth that he was interested. He just wanted to know how much the rent would cost. "Today I will talk to Dad and let you know tomorrow. I don't think it will exceed MXN 20,000 per month, but I'll check tomorrow." The next day, Elizabeth informed me that the rent would be MXN 15,000 without the need for a deposit. Gerardo immediately agreed. Luck was still on his side. 2 days later, Gerardo flew to Mexico City. He no longer wanted to take the bus because his economic prospects seemed clearer without so much uncertainty. The remaining savings were programmed to do two things. The first is the cost of moving and final settlement in Juarez. The second was a bonus of sorts that he intended to give to Myria to cover her most basic needs. Once he was financially stable, he thought about giving her a monthly allowance for her expenses if she decided to stay and live in his mother's house, which he highly doubted. Arriving in Mexico City, he headed to his mother's house. From the calls he had with Jorge, he knew his mother was fine, although she did not answer his calls while he was in Juarez. He suspected that she was still angry with him. When he entered the house, he found his mother sitting in the living room, watching TV. "Hi, how are you, Mom?" Surprised, Refugio replied. "You scared me. I didn't expect you so soon. How did it go for you?" "Very good, Mom. I've already been hired by the company. I start working in 10 days. "Congratulations. I guess this is what you were looking for." After a few seconds of silence, Gerardo asked, "How's Myria?" "Myria left 3 days after you." A little surprised, Gerardo exclaimed, "Where? Why do you want to know? Are you going to look for her?" Embarrassed, Gerardo remained silent, just out of curiosity. Curiosity killed the cat. Forget about Myria. This was the last time Myria's name was mentioned in Refugio's house. The next day, Gerardo showed up at Jorge's office. "How are you, Gerardo? How did it go?" "Everything went smoothly. I have a job and have already reserved a furnished apartment for living. How are you doing?" "Very good. Sebastian turned out better than expected. He tries hard and brings good ideas. It was your fault. What about Myria? You do not know? Myria left the house 3 days after I left." "Actually, I knew. Our mother told me. I didn't want to tell you on the phone." "Do you know where she went?" "No, Mom didn't want to tell me." "What's next for you?" "I start working in 9 days. I hope to take Rebecca with me. I'm going to see her now." He called the grocery store to see if Rebecca was there. Letty replied in a sarcastic tone. "Hello, Gerardo. Is it true that you want to steal my daughter?" "It's true, Letty. If you don't give it to me, I will take you, but I will not return empty-handed." Laughing, Letty replied, "I'm ready, Gerardo. When are we leaving?" "I'm going to your house now to see Rebecca. If you want, I'll see you there." "Very good, Gerardo. I'll see you there later. Let's see what happens." Gerardo took a taxi and went to Rebecca's house. Seeing him, Rebecca rushed into his arms. "I didn't expect you so soon, dear. Did something bad happen?" "Nothing bad. Everything went very well. I came for you." "What?" "Yes, I already have a job in Juarez. I reserved a furnished apartment and just came to pick you up and the rest of my things. Or have you already changed your mind?" "Do not kidding me, but first, come here." She took his hand and led him into the room. She closed the door and began to take off her clothes. "My sister and her son will be back in an hour. We have to use the time. I need it." He didn't think twice. Gerardo undressed and took Rebecca to bed. They managed to have sex twice, which was barely enough to relax. They bathed and went into the living room to wait for the other house guests. "Gerardo, have you visited your mother yet?" "Yes, yesterday, as soon as I arrived." Rebecca didn't want to ask directly. She simply said, "And?" "Myria left. She left the house 3 days after I left. I don't know where." "That's all?" "Yes, this story is over." A few minutes later, Maria, Rebecca's sister, arrived, accompanied by her son. The introductions were formal, and they continued to wait. A few minutes later, Letty arrived and greeted Gerardo warmly. Letty asked ironically, "What did Rebecca tell you? Is she going to come with you?" "Let her tell you." "Really, Mommy, I'm going with Gerardo." Now a little more serious, Letty said. "Well, we should celebrate that. There's a wine and liquor store a block away." Rebecca and Gerardo stood up and said, "We'll be back soon." After an hour of celebration, Letty stood up and walked over to Gerardo. "Gerardo, it's time for this girl to change her destiny. I hope you will be a good husband, and I hope you will not forget us and visit us from time to time." Gerardo stood up and hugged Letty, quietly telling her, "You can be sure of that. I will be a better husband and a better son-in-law." A year after the 1985 earthquakes, in their apartment in Ciudad Juarez, sitting in front of the television, Rebecca and Gerardo again watched scenes of earthquake destruction. The sight of the ruins of the Nuevo Leon building, one of the most frequently shown, made Gerardo's stomach cramp, and he could see, out of the corner of his eye, that there were a few tears on Rebecca's face. He had no doubt her pain was nothing compared to his. He stood up, walked over to the TV, and turned it off. He picked up Rebecca and hugged her. Not a single word could escape his lips. Gerardo and Rebecca remained to live in Ciudad Juarez, where they had 3 children. Gerardo's mother, Refugio, died 4 years after his departure. She was still not interested in meeting her sister-in-law. Nothing was known about Maria, even though years later, with the advent of the internet, mobile phones, and social networks, Jorge tried to find her, but to no avail. Mario also did not appear on the list of victims. His death is practically a fact. The 1985 Mexico earthquakes are believed to have killed at least 20,000 people and caused more than 300 buildings to collapse. Among them, there had to be at least 20 hotels of all types. Of course, at the time of the earthquake, some forbidden love was playing out in some of these hotels. This story was most likely not unique. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.